And if you insist, I'll submit some proposals for your conference.
Yes, please, please. So good afternoon officially. I'm Jessica Howard, and I am excited to be here with Dr. Matt Zakreski. Hopefully I'm doing his name justice there. He's a PsyD, and he's very high energy, creative clinical psychologist who utilizes an eclectic approach to meet the specific needs of his neurodiverse clients. He specializes in working with children and adolescents, as well as their families, in providing therapy and conducting psychological evaluations. He is proud to serve as a consultant to schools, a professor at the university level, and a researcher and author of his specialty, Giftedness. Dr. Zakreski is a member of Supporting the Emotional Needs of the Gifted, SENG, and the National Association for Gifted Kids and Children, and the New Jersey Association for Gifted Children. I've been in my school all day and I keep saying kids. He's also a member of the Pennsylvania Association for Gifted Education Board of Directors, and he has given professional talks, trainings, and keynote addresses at these organizations and many others. I've been having a great conversation learning about it. So he is also the co-founder and lead clinician at the Neurodiversity Collective, where he provides therapy, coaching, training, and psychological assessment. And today he's going to be talking with us about emotional regulation. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Matt. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. And thank you for the lovely introduction. I every time I hear it, I still go, God, is that really me? Hello, Facebook Live. It's great to see you guys. Thank you for giving up your Tuesday afternoon, evening to hang out with us. This is one of my favorite talks to give. Riding Out the Storm, Managing Emotional Intensity in Gifted Children. I'm Dr. Matt, so feel free to ask us questions in the chat. This is a topic that brings up a lot of questions. I will do my best to answer them, and then when we're done, you're going to get a copy of this. So I want you to make sure you have all the resources available to you. With all that said, let's dive in. So what are we here to do today? We're going to learn how to better manage our emotional outbursts. In psychology, we always talk about managing things in terms of frequency, intensity, and duration. So how often it happens, how intense it is, and how long it lasts. We're going to increase our understanding of where big emotions come from. And we're going to develop the language to communicate about emotional intelligence. What we're not going to do, because got to set those expectations as well, is we're not going to teach our kids not to have feelings. It does not work that way, so we're not going to try. The other thing is we're not going to give up. Now, I'm going to acknowledge, as a parent of two high energy, precocious children, and someone who does this professionally, this is really hard. And I went to 5 years of grad school to learn this. Hard things are harder to do. I know it's wild, but that's the thing, right? So we are going to set our expectations that this is a difficult thing to do. At the end of this hour, you're going to have a lot more skills. You're going to have to try to put them to use and make them work, but you're going to know more then than you do now. So quick background, as anyone who's ever heard me talk before, I'm a brain nerd. So here's our brain, and this is the limbic system. The limbic system is the emotional control center of our brain. It's a series of structures that work together to identify and communicate emotion throughout the brain. Now, one of the things we know about the brains of gifted and neurodiverse individuals is they are more wired. So there are more connections in the gifted brain, which means that when information passes through it, it is more likely to pass through this limbic system and thus be impacted by emotion. So we also know that the gifted brain, prefrontal cortex right here, is stuck with a prefrontal cortex, which is essentially the brake system or the control system of our brain that doesn't work as well. What that means, right, is that we have a hyperfast brain who's more likely to feel emotions and then has a system responsible for managing those emotions that doesn't really work as well. So what that does is gives us, neurologically speaking, a system that is primed to have big behaviors and not so much set up to control those big behaviors. And in my line of work, we know that big feelings mean big behaviors. So the gifted brain is setting up our kids to be more emotional more often for longer periods of time. What this ends up looking like, right, going through that prefrontal cortex, is this is where executive functioning skills are: planning, follow through, task initiation, task completion, self-regulation. And then, of course, the most important one, behavioral inhibition. So if you've ever seen gifted kids in a classroom, they, what is the capital of Colorado? And their hand is already up and they're already screaming the answer, and the teacher's not even done saying the question yet. That's behavioral inhibition, because there's some part of your brain that should be going, wait, now I can answer the question. So we need to develop that prefrontal cortex and allow our kids to get better at regulating their own behaviors. Because if we don't do that, this is what it looks like. Now, given that I live out here on the East Coast, normally I would make a Garden State Turnpike joke here, but since I'm speaking to my friends in Colorado, I would guess this is what the highway out to Denver International Airport looks like. When you're trying to get out of town to go to a conference or hit the beach, it's like, well, all of these different cars are trying to merge onto the same one lane stretch of road. And what ends up happening is we have an accident. This is exactly what the poor prefrontal cortex in our brain is tasked with doing. This system has all this information going through it, and it's trying to do all this information processing at the same time. And what ends up happening, it gets bogged down, it makes mistakes. This is, neurologically speaking, why our kids shout out the answers, why our kids constantly forget their backpacks. This is why our kids zone out, because there's just so much information going through this thing that is not equipped to handle it. So as a little example of this, right, here is a thumb. It's a good thumb. And what you could do is take a look at this thumb. And when you start staring at it, just say, okay, I'm started staring at this thing, and keep staring at it until you get bored. So let's do that all together right now. All right. So Facebook Live, we are all putting ourselves in the position to stare at this thumb, and go ahead and put in the chat when you're bored from staring at the thumb, starting now. So that was 10 seconds. And if you are still interested in staring at this thumb, I say, good for you, bravo. But I'm going to go out on a limb and guess most of us got bored with that pretty quickly. And this is a great example of the 3 stages of executive functioning. We have task initiation. We have to start the thing. Task endurance, the ability to keep doing a thing. And task completion, stopping that thing and moving on to another thing. So you can see, starting this wasn't that hard. Stopping it wasn't that hard. It was the duration. It was the endurance piece that's tricky. This is going to be really important as we talk about managing behaviors and managing emotions, because we need that executive functioning thing to identify a coping strategy and keep using it as the emotion is still there, when the brain is going to want to opt out of it very quickly. So this is a whole lot of stuff about how the brain and its emotional processing centers impact our bodies. What you need to know basically is the sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. Emotion comes in, our body gets ready to do something. And then it's balanced out by our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest system. So sympathetic ready to go, parasympathetic is saying, let's calm down. So our gifted kids have these hair trigger sympathetic nervous systems. They are ready to go at all times. We can increase the ability of the parasympathetic nervous system to regulate our kids, but it's going to take specific practice. What does all this mean? It means that when our kids get upset, our bodies are in fight or flight mode. And when they're in fight or flight mode, the part of our brain that has our coping skills, our personality, our communication strategies essentially goes offline. Because if you're running for your life from a bear, you don't really have time to stop and do some math problems, because then the bear will eat you. And that, we want to be not eaten by the bear. So, but what do we do, right? When our kids are upset, it's like, tell us what's wrong. Talk to me. Tell me what's going on. Use your words. And they really can't. That part of their brain is so impacted. So it's like this, it's like the top of their brain where all the good thinking stuff is pops off, right? We need to help our kids to put the cap back on. And that's what the core of this presentation is all about. So, and this is probably the point where you're sitting in your living room and you're going, yeah, sure, you can say that, Dr. Matt, but this is so frustrating. And yes, it is. Yep, totally. So to do this work, you need to be as okay as possible before you intervene. Now, you'll notice I use the words okay as possible, because you're going to see language out there that you have to be calm when you calm your kids down, and that doesn't work. So I relieve you of that idea, because here's the thing. It is antithetical to say calm down to a stressed out person. Saying calm down to a stressed out person makes them more stressed. So being okay as possible is owning what feelings you're feeling. So if you're upset, be upset. If you're angry, be angry. If you're stressed out, be stressed out, but own those feelings. Don't pretend they don't exist. So to do that, you check in with yourself. What's making this hard? Is it your needs that are being violated? Is it the kids' needs that are being violated? Or is it some sort of societal need, right? Your kid is refusing to shower. Understanding where that frustration comes from helps you wrap your head around it. And then, and this is so important with our kids, it's about separating content from process. Gifted kids are the masters of content. They will use all the words like it's a fire hose. And we will be left sort of with our head spinning like, I'm sorry, somehow I'm in violation of the Geneva Convention. We started talking about putting away your Legos. How did we get from A to Z? But so instead of being focused on content, I invite you to step into process. So process is the emotions that drive the words our kids are saying. It's how these things make us feel. So I was once working with a kid when I worked at a school for gifted kids. And I asked this young man to put on his jacket for us to go outside because it was January and he did not want to put on his jacket. And he yelled at me for a solid 45 minutes. And I kept batting back his arguments to him like we were playing tennis, right? Like, well, this, well, this, well, this, well, this. And I wasn't getting anywhere. So I stopped and I took a breath and I said, what am I missing here? And I just listened to his words and how they made me feel. And I felt angry and I felt stressed out, but I also felt weirdly embarrassed. So when he took a breath, I said, hey, I feel like I'm missing something here. What? Tell me how you're feeling. He's like, I'm pissed off. Obviously you're pissed off. What else is going on? He's like, well, you wouldn't get it. Try me. Everybody else at this school has really nice jackets and I don't have a nice jacket. And if I go outside, they're going to see that I have a bad jacket. That I can work with, right? Because if I kept arguing with him about whether it was his right to wear a jacket or not, we would probably still be in that gymnasium and my beard would be much longer than it is right now. Instead, I was able to step out of what he was saying to why he was saying it. And once we touched that emotion, we immediately were able to move to problem solving. Right? I said, hey, man, I get that. Thank you for letting me know. Here's some things we can do. And it became not a problem. But we have to step out of content into process. And we're going to talk about that as a skill as we go forward. The secret to all of this, my friends, if you take nothing else away from this talk, and I hope you take lots, but this is the thing. Our brains and our bodies want to return to homeostasis. Our brains and our bodies want to use the parasympathetic nervous system to get back to baseline. That's a good thing because being stressed out takes a lot of energy and it's bad for our bodies. Our bodies want to calm down. So the brain needs a request to engage that parasympathetic nervous system. And that code is, I'm feeling blank. Whatever that emotion is, you say it out loud. Because when you say that, your brain goes, oh, that's what's going on? And then sends the codes to the parasympathetic nervous system to calm your body down. So in my line of work as a psychologist, I'm fond of saying things are simple, but not easy. This is a simple thing. Say what you're feeling. That does not mean for 1 second that it's easy. And that's an important thing. So, and because I like to put my money where my mouth is, here is an example of a time I used this thing. So a couple of years ago, I was speaking at SENG's conference out in Chicago. And so at the time I lived outside Philadelphia. My wife decided to come with me to the conference. So we woke up at 5 a.m. East Coast time. We took an Uber to the airport. We got on our flight. We flew from Philadelphia to Chicago. We deplaned in Chicago. We got our bags. We got on another Uber. We took the Uber to the hotel. We checked into the hotel. So now it's 1:30 in the afternoon Chicago time. So it's 2:30 in the afternoon in my body. And I had a bagel for breakfast at around 6 a.m. So I am hungry and I'm tired and I am stressed. And this was one of those hotel rooms where you had to put your key card in a little slot by the light switch for the lights in the room to work. Now, I didn't know this. I didn't travel a lot then. So I'm like trying to make the lights work. All I want to do is put on the TV for a minute and I cannot do it. And I am starting to freak out and I'm stomping around the room like a tiger in a cage. And my wife is sitting there watching me make a fool of myself. Finally, she's like, "Hey, Matt, how are you feeling right now?" "What do you mean? How are you feeling?" "Well, I'm upset." "What else?" "I'm angry. I'm pissed off." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Because like immediately, as soon as I said that I was pissed off, it was like, a light went off. I'm like, oh, I'm so mad. I'm having trouble thinking, which is making me madder. So then I went back to the light switch and said, "There's this little slot here. There's no way, this little key card," boop, lights went on. So I share this story because we can all struggle with this, even as grown-ups. And when we own our own emotional stuff to our kids, it makes it a little easier for them to access these skills when they need to. So all of this then flows into the fundamental rule of all this. You are allowed to feel however you want about anything you want. That is your right as a human being. So the example I often use here, so everyone out there in the Facebook Live, or if you're watching this later, if you are afraid of clowns, please give me a thumbs up. So I will let you give lots of thumbs up because clowns are terrifying and I don't like them. So you're allowed to be afraid of clowns, but it's what you do with those feelings that matter. So I can be afraid of clowns. I am not allowed to run out of the room screaming and leave y'all hanging for this Facebook Live if a clown walks into the room. I'm responsible for dealing with those feelings in a more pro-social way, even though the idea of that is legitimately terrifying to me. So once we've established that rule, which validates our kids' feelings and then makes us partners with them in doing the right behavior, we can set expectations. We may never get these disruptive feelings to zero. Remember, frequency, intensity, and duration. We may never get those feelings to a zero. You may never have a kid who's never angry ever again. But if we can make them less angry, less often for shorter periods of time, that's a pretty good thing. The presence of a feeling or a presence of a meltdown does not mean that you or your kid failed. That it's so important because it's so easy to snap back to here we go again. Oh my gosh, I thought we were done with this. And you forget that your kid hasn't had a meltdown for 6 months. One meltdown doesn't undo all that. It's not fun, but we got to see it in context. And oftentimes that's my job. Progress in this is not linear. It's not consistent. It's not forever. We have to keep working on it. We're going to have good days and bad days. The impact of the environment is real. Think about when your kids struggle most. Are they in places? Are there lots of crowds? Are they loud places? Got to pay attention. Those are vital variables. We want to focus on skills that generalize across situations. It's not when you're at a sleepover with these kids, you do these things. And when you're at a sleepover with these kids, you do these things. It's when you feel stressed out, here are things to do. Praise is way more powerful than punishment. If your kid is melting down, the last thing we want to do is yell at them for being upset. I will say it again, this work is really hard. And it's up to us, the parents, the teachers, the grown-ups, the mental health professionals out there to help our kids regulate their emotions. If they could do it themselves, they would. Beneath every behavior, there's a feeling. Beneath every feeling, there's a need. And when we focus on meeting that need, then focusing on the behavior, we start dealing with the cause of the problem, not the symptom. With the kid with the jacket that I talked about before, his need was not to be embarrassed. So I let him borrow my coat, which was pretty cool. He got to, and people were like, why are you getting to wear Dr. Matt's coat? That's awesome. I was like, well, because he was so cool today. And he felt like a rock star for those 5 minutes, right? And then he handed the coat back to me and went to go play baseball. Great. But when I was focusing on his disrespect and his yelling, then I was stuck in this behavior soup with him. I wasn't able to get the perspective I needed to change it. So as we walk through some coping strategies here for the back half of this, let me introduce our co-pilot. Dun, da, da, da. Calvin, sort of the original gifted kid, right? And you're like, but Calvin gets bad grades. Well, I'm assuming if you're coming to a Conversations with CAGT, you know that giftedness and academic performance are not exactly always the same, but Calvin's creativity and his vocabulary and his introspection are certainly gifted kid. And the fact that he struggles so much is also totally gifted kid. But Calvin's going to help us talk about feelings. So becoming more aware of our feelings is a great way to increase our control over them. Feelings start in our brain, but they impact our entire body. So just as an example, right, I'm going to get scared. So my eyebrows move, my forehead moves, my nose moves, my mouth moves, my ears move, my jaw moves, my neck moves, my hands move. It isn't just the mouth, right? So what that does, and this plays, I think, really well to how our kids work, play to their analytical brain, play to their junior scientist brain. What does your body look like when you're fill in the blank here, right? Eyes, cheeks, mouth, nose, eyebrows, forehead, chest, hands, feet. If you're anxious and you're a foot tapper like me, tap, 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 tap. You might not see that up here, right? I look totally calm up here, but underwater, I'm a duck. Right? My legs are flapping, flapping, flapping. So the more aware we get of emotions as a whole body experience gives us the knowledge to more regulate those emotions. And you may need to prime this starting, right? You may say, hey, I see your face is getting tight and your ears are getting red and your jaw is clenched. Those are signs that to me that you look angry. Tell me what's going on. You might need to prompt this language at first, but kids are going to pick it up really quick. The other aspect of this is that we tend to only use emotion-focused language when our kids have an undesirable emotion, when they're stressed, scared, angry, freaking out. Start this process in positive emotions. If your kid is watching their favorite YouTuber and they're laughing, they're having a great time, be like, hey, I think you were really, I saw you watching Shark and Shark was doing his crazy Minecraft videos. Tell me, how it looks like you're happy to me. How can I tell that you're happy? And the kid said, your kid might say, well, I'm smiling and I'm laughing and my body's full of energy. That starts that dialogue, that starts that awareness. And it starts in a way that's a lot more accessible than you're freaking out. Tell me why you're freaking out, because then our kids aren't feeling as safe or as comfortable to process those feelings with us. Outbursts. Calvin is in many ways the king of the outbursts. So watch out for what we call in psychology replacement language. Kids who are hyperverbal, like many of our kids are, may use code words or phrases to replace their feelings. They may say stuff like, I'm so bored, which might actually mean they're bored. It might mean that this is too hard. Or it might mean that I don't like my teacher. They might say, I'll kill you. Right? Many of you have had younger siblings. You've probably heard that before or said it before. All of my friends hate me. School is stupid. Now the idea, right? Content versus process. We hear the words, we pay attention to how they make us feel, right? Oftentimes our kids skip from the experience to the replacement language and they miss the feelings word that's in between them, right? When I was working at that same school for gifted kids, I had a kid who came up to me on the playground when he was clearly upset. And I asked him if he was okay. And he looked me dead in the eye and said, Dr. Matt, I want to kill you with an axe and chop your body up into little pieces and throw you in a creek so beavers eat your body and your bones. Now, if we pay attention to the content of that, I would have called 911 and climbed up a tree. That is a very scary thing to hear. I don't want anyone to murder me with an axe. However, right, it was clear to me that A, he was 6 and I'm a pretty big dude, so take my chances in a fight. But it's pretty clear to me that he was trying to communicate an emotion to me. It's like, wow, it sounds like you're really angry. He goes, I am so angry. Tell me what's making you angry. I got picked last for kickball. Let's see if we can fix that. Boom. I'm on his team. We're solving the problem. And we went over to the kickball field and he literally held my hand. I remember thinking to myself, like, you went from killing me with an axe to holding my hand in 30 seconds. And with the right emotional approach to this, it can look like that. We want to prompt a use of feelings terms. I'm, you're feeling, you look. It's so important to tell our kids that feelings can't be wrong, right? They're allowed to be freaked out. They're allowed to be angry. They're allowed to be scared. So we validate that, and then we move into how can we help? So it's a two-step process. Verbal aggression. Obviously this is something that feels a little bit more high stakes in terms of intervening. Context is everything here. How much does this have to do with this incident that happened right now? How much does it have to do with their history of these kids? How much does it have to go with the kind of day, week, month this kid is having? Context is vital because it's going to give us information. Generally speaking, we want to ignore and avoid if we can. So get away from the person or situation. Take 3-5 minutes. That's fine, right? That's a good solution. Oftentimes we make kids like sort of tough it out and white knuckle it. If we can give them a break, by all means, have a safe person. Establish that person beforehand, right? I can't tell you how many kids I work with who are allowed to step into the counselor's office and call Dr. Matt if they need to. It's one of the things we do, right? And then vitally, especially for our older kids, never text, email, or post angry. Because you're angry right now, but then it stays online forever and that context fades. And all that knows is that in 3 years from now, you posted, I hate everyone and I wish I was dead. And you won't even remember why you were so upset. But everybody who read that is seeing the content, not the process of your words. So, we always tell our kids, you are allowed to feel scared, angry, jealous, whatever that thing is, but we are never allowed to say or threaten with inappropriate or unsafe words. Remember, you're allowed to feel whatever you want to feel. You have to choose the better behavior. We're going to help our kids do that, right? But we can't say that to the person, especially if it's online. In public. So taking our children out in public is a great reminder of how hard this all is. And so here are some specific strategies on having your kids in public. The stakes for emotional meltdowns in public are, or at least feel, higher. So one of the things we can do here is what I like to call the minivan chat. Now, I know not all of us drive minivans, but we're going to do the minivan chat. Before we leave, we are going to talk about what we're doing, how long we're going to be gone, where are we going, what do I need from you there, what is my behavioral expectation for you? Because sometimes it's totally good if the kid is on their phone the entire time, right? If you're running errands and your kid can just play Pokemon Go the whole time, cool, I don't need anything from you. But if I need you to talk to the grownups, if I need you to be good with other kids, if I need you to pay attention and help me out, then I need you to be more present. And I need to set that expectation. What tools do we have to help us be successful, right? We are going to the mall. You have to try on shirts. I know you don't want to try on shirts. So when we're not trying on shirts, you can use your phone. When we're done trying on shirts, we're going to go get a soft pretzel. Those are all tools at our disposal. Set expectations for who else might be there, knowing that surprises always happen. And then I am a big believer in having a code word for kids. And what that does is it empowers them to have sort of a secret with you. So if you say to your kid, and if you're getting upset, if you're starting to have trouble, I want you to find a way to say to me, Boba Fett, right? Say Boba Fett. And I know that means I got to get out of here with you right now. So if I hear you say Boba Fett to me, I'm going to say, excuse me, other person I'm talking to you, I need to go talk to my kid right now. And we are going to scoot out of here, right? But instead of your kid who's, remember, we lose that good thinking part of our brain. Instead of that kid trying to articulate to you, Dad, I'm starting to freak out. I'm really panicked. I don't know, like, how does that help me? Say, Boba Fett. I know what Boba Fett means. We're out the door. It's a big thing. It's a nice tool to have in your toolbox. Check in often. talk about triggers. If you know your kid, you know what their triggers are. Can you avoid them? Can you minimize them, right? Noise canceling headphones in public are a very good thing. Don't panic. If you see things starting to happen, if think of your kid struggling as a kid who's in a pool thrashing about. Now, if we immediately jump into the water, we are joining them in the panic, right? This is the sort of thing. Can they swim to the edge? Can you prompt them out of the situation, right? We need to think about what our kids need in that moment from us and for us. Two very different things. It's also really important to think about your needs versus the kid needs. So classic example, right? It's a Saturday. I take my kids out. We're on a couple errands. We got to get to Home Depot. We got to go to Costco. And then we've got to go return some stuff at the mall, right? So I've got my two kids with me and we do Home Depot, fine. We do Costco, fine. I'm pulling into the parking lot of the mall and I look and my kids are starting to freak out. Now I have to make a choice in this moment, right? I'm thinking to myself, I really need to get these returns done. I also know that I don't need to get them done today and my kids are starting to freak out. If I pull them out of the car and I put them in a stroller and I drag them into the mall, that's going to be a scene. I'm going to be stressed. They're going to feel worse. I might not even end up getting the returns done. So I said, guys, you've been great. Do you guys want to go home? Yes. Turned around and drove home. 2 hours later, when my kids were calm, my daughter asked if she could get back in the car with me so we could go back to the store. We got back in the car and we went to the store. Easy peasy. Now, I know it doesn't always work that way, right? So then the other piece of this is to be strategic. If you've got 3 errands to do and their importance is 1, 2, 3, do important one first, get it done. Other things, you can always find time to do them later. Lastly, and this is my favorite thing, if you haven't carried your kid out of Target like a football running back, go Broncos. Are you even a parent? And that's the thing, guys. There are going to be moments where just all these strategies don't work and you got to scoop your kid up and run out of there thinking, now I got to find a new Target. Great. I guess there's one in Colorado Springs I can go to. But that's the thing, right? If you haven't carried your kid out of Target like that, you're actually in the minority. If we did a show of hands right now, many of us have had to pull the plug and get our kids out of a situation really quick. And that doesn't mean you're a failure. It actually means you're in really good company. Disappointment. So we tend to rush to fix problems when our kids have problems. And that can actually serve to minimize the pain of our kids. And that's a problem, right? We want our kids to feel their feelings and understand that we're here to support them. So, if a kid tells us a problem and we're like, oh, yes, I know what that's like. First off, okay, boomer, do we even really understand? It is so different being a kid today than it was 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago, 30 years, 40 years. It's a different game. Once your kid has shared what's going on, ask if you can share a similar anecdote. If your kid just got their heart broken and you got your heart broken, ask, can I share this anecdote? And acknowledge that it's not going to fit perfectly because it's a different situation. But if you ask, you let your kid opt in. An upset kid is not the time to have a life lesson. You'll notice it. And if we have any dads with us, hi dads, I'm a dad myself. I'm going to speak directly to you because this is a thing we do. This is a guy thing. And our kid is upset. They didn't make the soccer team. And you say, well, Johnny, it's because you didn't practice. You didn't show commitment. And here's the thing, guys. Our kids know that. Our kids know that they failed and they feel pretty terrible about it. So there's not time for the capital L life lesson. You be there first. You sit with them. You hold those feelings. And then you say, once that's done, let's talk about what we do now. Not a time for our life lesson. As Sheldon Cooper would say, oh, I informed you thusly. I so informed you thusly. That might be screaming in your brain, and you're probably right. But it's not the time. Save that. Empathize first. You seem really upset. I'm sorry it didn't go your way. Get some more information. What's making them upset? What can we do to fix the problem right now? What can we do to fix it later? If your kid got cut from the soccer team, there's not going to be tryouts for another 10, 12 months. Can't do anything about it now, but later we can talk about how we improve. And then if our kids tried something and they failed, I'm a big fan of the reframe of changing fail to frequent attempts in learning. Another way to say it is you either win or you learn. So if your kid tried out for first chair oboe in the Colorado Youth Orchestra and they got second chair oboe, horror of horrors, I'm embarrassed to even say it. What that is you learn something. We may not know what it is right now, but we have the opportunity to learn it. So let's keep our hearts open to that. And then we will come back to that at some point and figure out how to do auditions better next time. And you'll get that first chair. Panic, giant B. Tips and tricks. We all have different trigger items and we all have different levels of response to those. So if your top 10 panic trigger thing is clowns like me, you want to have different coping strategies for top 10, oh my gosh, here it happens. But if it's something like a B, which is like, there's a B, it's like a 2 or 3 on the scale, they have different strategies for that. Get to know your kid, their specific concerns, fears, and phobias. A great thing you can do if they're starting to panic is to concretize their feelings. That engages that good thinking part of your brain. It brings it back online. We want to concretize their feeling. So if you're out with your kid at a zoo, and your kid is scared of alligators, and oh my gosh, there's an alligator in the exhibit. We thought it was closed today. Your kid is starting to shut down because they see an alligator. Hey, what feeling do you have right now? I'm scared. How big is that feeling right now? It's huge. What shape is it? If it was a shape, what shape would it be? It's the shape of an oval. Okay, it's an oval shaped, huge feeling. What color is it? Purple. If I could touch it, what would it feel like? Squishy. On a scale of 1 to 10, how intense is it? It's a 10. Every time we talk about feeling, we take it from this nebulous concept to something concrete. And then you'll notice I kept repeating the words. So it's a big, squishy, oval-shaped, purple feeling. Where do you feel it in your body? I feel it in my chest. You're feeling that in your chest. Wow. Okay, so what are we going to do with this giant, purple, squishy, oval-shaped feeling in your chest? And you'll notice we took it from this weird thing to something, even if it's metaphorical, concrete. When in doubt, escape is always a good strategy. Can we escape mentally? Can we escape physically? Can we escape socially, right? Going to an event with your best friend, that's scary. You have that social escape with you. Physical escape, knowing when you can leave, how you can leave, setting expectations around that. And mentally, we all have little mental escape devices in our pocket, right? Our phones. Or, can you carry around what I like to call a board bag? Board bag is a bunch of stuff to do. Helps you if you're bored or if you're overwhelmed. So if you're sitting in a long line and your kid doesn't like long lines, look, I have this bag here. It has a Sudoku. It has a Harry Potter book. It has some coloring pages. It has a small nuclear reactor that you can build in your spare time. Your kid's like, I want the nuclear reactor, because of course they do. So having those escapes as a part of your bag of tools, very good idea. And the other thing here is that our anxiety, our panic, it lies to us. It tells us that things are bad and catastrophic and we can't survive them. And oh my gosh, it's always going to be like this. The longer we survive our panic, the longer we can survive our panic. Our anxiety systems are screaming at us that these are the end times. It's actually not true. Be strategic. If you can expose your kids to things that are hard for them for longer periods of time, they develop mastery over their emotional experience. So if your kid has a tough time at birthday parties, you say, hey, we're going to try and stay at this for a half hour. If we can't stay for a half hour, you say, Boba Fett, we're out of here. But if you can stay for 35 minutes or 40 minutes, that's a way for me to know that how hard you're working at getting in charge of your feelings. So it's like, I thought I could only make it 30 minutes. I made it 37 minutes. That's awesome. That's a huge difference. And that's going to feel really good to your kids. So the longer you survive, the longer you can survive. Peer difficulties. Lots of tips and tricks here. Other people make living very difficult. That's true. I always say, most of my clients go to therapy for the people in their lives who won't go to therapy. So other people make life very difficult. Largely that becomes just because we can't control their reactions or their behavior. So if you are having trouble with a peer, There are always possible explanations, because your brain is probably going to default to they hate me or I suck. And those are possible. I'm not going to lie to you. It's possible you screw this up. But let's think if we can explore some other options, right? Your brain quickly went to this thing. Let's see what other things are out there. We call this first thought, second thought, right? So we say, clearly we know what your first thought was. What was your second thought? Well, okay, so Johnny didn't say hi to me in the hallway, so Johnny hates me. Okay, that's a possibility. What's another one? Johnny didn't say hi to me in the hallway because he thinks I suck. That's an option. What's another one? Johnny didn't say hi to me in the hallway because he didn't wear his goggles in chemistry and he got blinded with sulfuric acid. Possible. What else you got? Right. And then we just keep playing it, because every time you give the brain another avenue to consider, we blunt the impact of our initial idea, and we expose ourselves to all the possibilities of human behavior. So we can prompt, what if they've been replaced by an android? What if they are planning a surprise party for you and they know if they make eye contact with you, they're going to freak out? Like, we don't disagree. We just acknowledge that there's all these possibilities. And the takeaway there is that, what do we know? What do we know that happened? And then what don't we know? Because there's always pieces we don't know. When we get more information, we almost always find that there's a misunderstanding based on information we didn't have. Once we have that information, there's a lot we can do. Positive exposure to peers is always a good idea. If you can plan it, having two kids who don't necessarily like each other work together on a project, it helps them start to see each other as human beings, as three-dimensional people. Positive exposure can also be stuff like, if you get a reward, I want these two kids to have it. Make sure that they get a positive experience together. It's another good one. My fundamental language here is the idea of intent versus impact. And this is probably the most important thing when it comes to working with our kids' emotions, because our gifted kids, as a rule, get very stuck up in what they meant to do. I wasn't trying to defend them. I was just trying to tell them that their calculus equation was wrong. Sure, I understand that was your intention. But once we do a thing, we lose control over how it impacts other people. Well, but I didn't mean it to. Sure, right? But if you and I are walking down the street and I bump into you and you fall down and break your leg, it doesn't really matter if I was trying to break your leg or not, because your leg is still broken. So intent versus impact is a really helpful frame for our kids to see how their behavior can impact others in different ways, regardless of what they mean. So all of this comes down to the thunderstorm metaphor, right? Thunderstorms are big and loud and scary, and they're disruptive. And in many ways, that's exactly what it's like having the emotional intensity of a gifted kid. So if you've got a thunderstorm coming, first thing I want you to do is get someplace safe. Now you're going to say, but I had other stuff I had to do, Dr. Matt. Sure. But if a thunderstorm's coming, you get somewhere safe. Second thing is, you try not to be mad at the thunderstorm. Now that seems like a silly thing, right? But you can probably imagine how many teachers and mental health professionals and parents and coaches get mad at the thunderstorm, right? They like, yeah, you need to stop being a thunderstorm. Great. If you do that, it's not helpful, and it actually can even be dangerous. Sure, you're allowed to be disappointed, even scared of the thunderstorm. You really wanted to go to the Rockies game, and now there's a thunderstorm, and you can't do it. That sucks. It totally does. But if you go out into the storm and wave your fist at it, you're increasing the chance you get hit by lightning. And I don't want that for you. All storms pass eventually, and most storms are much shorter than you think. Once the storm is passed, we clean up and we try to get back to what we're doing. When that storm is over, take the time to be calm and focused on the task at hand. If your kid has a meltdown and they are just calming down from their meltdown, it's not the time to process what happened. We get calm, we get safe, we regulate. And when the time is right, we talk about what happened. We're non-judgmental. What happened? What made you feel that way? What do you think was the impact of that? What can we learn? We is the key word here. We means parents, teachers, kid, peers, everybody involved can learn. Remember, either win or we learn. Thunderstorms are rarely winning moments. So what did we learn from this? Well, Mom, I didn't have lunch and I know I should have eaten lunch. And you asked me to go to the store and I'm so hungry and I didn't. And I'm realizing now that I should have eaten lunch. That's the thing we should learn. We got to eat. Gifted kids tend to run hypoglycemic anyway. It's a good idea to have snacks on us at all times to keep our kids from getting hangry on us. And the other thing is with thunderstorms, they're going to happen again, right? I'm assuming summer in the Midwest is like summer in the East Coast. We get a thunderstorm basically every afternoon at 4:30. So you know it's going to happen again. The trick is to see the thunderstorms coming, pay attention to the news, and be proactive. Like, oh man, I notice there's a thunderstorm every day at 6 o'clock. I should probably not plan something important for 6 o'clock, right? That's how we learn. So other skills for us to have as parents, we got to practice what we teach. We model our behavior. If you get mad at your kids, use these strategies to talk about what happens. I lost my temper. I lost my temper for these reasons. My intention was to do this. I can see the impact on you was this other thing. I'm owning it. I'm modeling this for you. I'm a big believer in meta communication, talking about talking. Simple way to do this is to ask your kid permission. Hey, I'd like to ask some more questions. Is that okay? I'm talking about what I'm about to say. Or when you're ready, I'd like to share with you a story about a time like something like this happened to me. When you're ready, I'd like to share a story. Talking about talking. Remove your ego as much as possible. Remember, it's rarely about us. Proactive work goes a long way. Check in as much as possible. Another thing here is to avoid shoulds. You know, if you say to your kid, you should keep it together, well, then you're shaming your kid for a thing that didn't happen. Your kid could have kept it together. They could have followed the rules. They could have kept their hands to themselves. They clearly didn't. It's a much more helpful question to ask what got in their way. Hey, okay, so I know that sleepovers are hard for you. And I know that we talked about the rules and you know that you shouldn't put your hands on another person. So why couldn't you keep your hands to yourself? Help me understand that. That aligns me with the kid, doesn't make me judge, jury, and execution. And emotions are normal and there's no value judgment to them. So we don't have good feelings or bad feelings. We have comfortable or uncomfortable feelings. So why do we work so hard at this? As Calvin's dad shows us, right? This is the end of the comic strip where Calvin's broken his binoculars and he spends all day freaking out, dying 1,000 deaths. And you can see that his dad has just completely hit the roof. He's freaking out. And then Calvin says, I have an idea, Dad. Let's pretend I already feel terrible about it. And you don't need to rub it in anymore. So in my line of work, I get to work with a lot of upset kids and a lot of upset parents. And I would tell you that pretty much every single time the kid is upset and embarrassed and hurt and fearful. And sure, they might be sticking an anger mask on all those feelings and trying to pretend that they're fine or they don't care or it's mom's fault, whatever. Sure. But at the end of the day, our kids feel these things and they feel them deeply. And we need to honor that. We need to make space for our kids to have those feelings because they already feel terrible. Us piling onto that only makes things worse. We can hold our kids accountable. We can have firm boundaries and clear communication. But when we emotionally pile on, we almost always make things worse. So let's be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So a lot of resources here. Obviously, there's more to this than we can cover in an hour. A lot of calming down strategies for kids, a couple of great YouTubes on self-regulation strategies, more information about how the gifted brain processes emotion and how we can use that knowledge to empower ourselves. And look at that. I actually did pretty good time-wise. So, okay. So let's open it up to some questions. Here's how you contact me. I'm at drmattzakreski@gmail.com. We also have a really vibrant Facebook community. on my professional page. So if you get a moment, please feel free to give me a follow at facebook.com/Dr. Matt Zakreski. What I'll do is, if we want to, I can unshare the screen and we can take some questions.
That sounds fabulous. Yep.
Awesome.
And I actually have a couple that were sent to me ahead of time. So we can start off with those, and then I'll be checking the feed to see what additional questions. But I just want to start by saying thank you so much, Matt. This and every comment that I saw on our Facebook Live was saying the same thing. Lots of, oh, so true. Oh, yes, talk about the feelings. And so you definitely hit on exactly what we needed. So I appreciate that. So I'm going to jump in. I think these questions might have even carried over from the last talk you had. So let me see. First one is from Cameron Hayes. Any words of advice for parents of 2E children with mood and attention disorders and emotional intensity from being gifted student?
Yeah.
Child.
Yeah. Well, first off, hi, Cameron, if you're out there, big fan. So the more 2E our kid is, the more asynchronous they are, right? So there's going to be that disconnect between their intelligence level, their emotional level, their social level, their physical development level. And what is vital for our 2E kids is to meet them at the level of their behavior in that moment. So if you have a 14-year-old who is cognitively 19 and most of the time is emotionally mature like a 19-year-old, but now is having a typical 10-year-old meltdown, if you approach that like, you're 19 in your brain, why are you being this way? You have set yourself and your kid up for failure. If your kid is acting 10 years old, we have to figure out why they're acting 10 years old right now, right? We regress when we're upset. So that's a framework to keep in mind, right? Meeting our kids where they are in that moment. Because here's the thing. If we let our expectations drift up to the highs our 2E kids have, right? Then we are creating a big gap to fall when kids get upset and have behaviors, because an upset kid is rarely easy or fun to manage. So we're already coming at it to a disadvantage, right? We're already like, great, now my kid's freaking out. And the more of our own expectations we layer onto that, the more we're making our own job harder.
Well said. That is all right. The next question is from Amy Dougherty, and it sounds like she says maybe off topic, but important. She loves the performance cliff information. Now what to do about it? How do we help teachers identify it and help kids learn what they need to avoid it?
Ooh, okay. So the performance cliff is like, is very much its own separate talk, but I will do, let's see. The short version of this is fundamental to avoiding the performance cliff is building the soft skills, the emotional regulation skills that come with facing and overcoming challenges. So if you give a first grader who can do calculus, first grade math problems, 1 + 1 is 2, they don't develop as much resiliency. In fact, they learn to cut corners and skate. And so when all of a sudden they are faced with calculus, it's like, whoa, I don't have the infrastructure. So when I work with kids in therapy, I say, this exercise I'm doing with you is designed to help you build resilience. I'm going to expose you to something that's a little bit harder than you can do, so you level up to be able to do it. Now, you may not do that today. We may have to do this 50 times, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm intentionally exposing you to something that's a little harder than you can do, because that's how you grow. It isn't appropriate to ask a 1-year-old who's a pretty good basketball player to play in the NBA, right? All right, you're on the Nuggets now, go play point guard. That's too much of a leap, right? You will fail. But if you have a first grader who's doing pretty good at basketball, and we said maybe he can play with the second graders, that's a realistic thing. So we intentionally expose kids to challenges to combat the performance cliff by building resiliency.
That is awesome. Some Vygotsky in there. Zone of proximal development.
Well done. Yes, you know your stuff.
Lots of work through grad school on that one. Okay, Daniella on our Facebook Live has a question. She's asking if you have any tips for what to do when a child consistently seems to be more upset rather than less when you name their emotion, or try to ask them to name their emotion when they're upset.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, all behavior is communication, right? And for many kids, naming their emotion can feel triggering or dysregulating, and it's something they want to avoid, even if we all know it would help them, right? So what I might say to a kid instead is like, hey, you look super upset to me, and it looks like asking you to do something right now would be really tough. So what I'm going to do instead is, can you give me thumbs up, thumbs down on this? Are you too upset to do this right now? Okay, great. We're not going to do it. Would you like to take a walk with me? Okay, so I'll take a walk. Great job telling me. Would you like to have 5 minutes of quiet time? Awesome. I'm going to sit here quietly for 5 minutes because I can't leave you because you're upset. And I want to stay here and support you, but I'm not going to say anything. And when you're ready in 5 minutes, we'll see where we're at. Right. So we can scale down our style of intervention based on where our kids are. I have a kid who we've set it up with him and his mom that he has a tough time finding words with his 2E makes that really tricky for him. When he gets upset, he'll text her. So it would look super disrespectful because she's yelling at him. He's like, right. And mom has to work really hard not to get triggered by that, because it looks like I'm like, I'm like blocking you on purpose. But then he'll put his words in a text bar. He's like, I'm having a really tough time today. I don't have the words right now. And then she can respond verbally or respond via text. Right. And when we do group therapy, oftentimes they're texting in the window. And I'm like, that means they're doing what I need them to do. It may not look like what other people will do, but since when have our kids ever looked like anybody else? So.
That is awesome. Those digital natives, you got to use what works for them. And Amy says, thank you, Matt, for answering. And then it looks like we have one more question if you're up for it.
Of course.
And I'm going to say, I might say your name wrong. Renya would be the name. And she says, how do I discourage my child from seeking out the things that are causing her to panic? For example, she's 6 and very interested in elements. She reads about thallium, not sure, and searches everywhere for any possible trace of it in a panic mode. Repeat with uranium, etc.
So that is, it's a very common thing we see with this population. And unfortunately, it's something you're probably going to keep seeing, because panic is about lack of control, right? So one of the ways our brain is like, I'll control this is by learning everything about it. If I know where every single piece of polonium in the state of Colorado is, I will feel like I'm in control. Of course, in the time it took me to look that up, somebody else has probably driven in from New Mexico with polonium, so I'll have to start the thing again, right? So naming the function of the behavior for what it is. It sounds to me like you're trying to control this by learning everything you can about it. And I love where that's coming from. I love that you're using your brain. The problem with this is that there's no way for us to know everything. What I'd like to suggest is, can you tell me what about polonium is making you upset? I'm worried there's going to be nuclear war. Yeah, me too. I'm right there with you, kid. Like, look, yeah, right. So, hey, let's talk about things that make us feel safe. Let's talk about things that we can do to make a positive impact. So now we are acknowledging the feeling, but we're redirecting that energy to something that's pro-social and problem solving, right? I cannot tell you how many times I've had kids redirect their anxiety and their rage to a letter to their senator. There are a couple of senators that are like, oh my gosh, stop CCing me on these emails. And I'm like, I won't, because it's a good redirect. So, the idea is, if you see what content versus process, right? Like, why would a kid want to talk about clowns if they're scared of clowns? The process of that is, I'm terrified. I don't want to be terrified. This is a thing that I think might help me be less terrified. So it doesn't have to make sense to us, because it makes sense to our kids.
Very good. Wow. And that's the best way to end it. Got to make
Yeah, hooray.
Well, I just want to thank you again, and I encourage everybody to go and hop on and join Matt's Facebook page. I know I am, and I appreciate your time tonight, and all of the Facebook Live people. We will head out for the evening, and everyone have a wonderful night.
Thanks for having me.
Oh.